sports fans, and welcome to the Heavy Hitters Podcast, the ultimate destination for your weekly dose of sports excitement with co-host Darnell Duff.
Now it's Sandvin, right point with it, left circle, Paul wants it, fires it, scores! Ashton Paul, welcome to Dauphin!
And co-host Jeff Henson.
Williams, blue line, shot, rebound! Oh, you hit! Score! Score! Morgan McLean! The Storm are AJHL champions!
Whether you're into goals, touchdowns, three-pointers, or home runs, we've got it all covered. We're here to bring you the latest updates, witty commentary, and a whole lot of sports love. So, whether you're tuning in from the sidelines or the comfort of your own couch, get ready for a fast-paced ride through the world of sports. Strap in, because it's game time on the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
We are back. Folks, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is for you. Welcome back to the Heavy Hitter Podcast. My name is Duffy, Darnell Duff. Always a pleasure to be joined by the inferior general manager, but really now? I gotta say it. The wonderful Henny, Jeff Henson. This is the Heavy Hitter Podcast. And Jeff, I know we've taken a few week hiatus, I believe going on 3 weeks, but life just sort of happens and we had to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been busy the last couple of weeks. My fiance and I have been finalizing details of a purchase of a house, and now we're...
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. We're fully into now moving into our new home, and of course, packing up all of her belongings and my belongings from where we're both living right now, moving it into a new home. Really excited about that. Of course, that's also planning for our wedding in about a month's time. And you've been busy yourself. Brody recently completing her college degree, so you guys are off for that graduation. And of course, you guys preparing for baby Duff, number one, to arrive in this world in a couple months' time as well.
Yeah, our baby girl, early August. And I go home every day and I say to the wife, because we had a baby shower this past weekend and it was awesome. So much love and a ton of presents. So I told the wife that I'm going to come home and I'm going to assemble one thing every day. And if I do that, we will be ready for the baby. I did a bassinet, then I did a playpen. I'm on fire right now.
I'm impressed.
And you know who's also on fire? Well, I am, as general manager of the Duff Brewmasters.
Wow.
I know you fleeced me in a trade early in the season, but since that I have revamped and I'm on fire. Just got Elias Lindholm. I got Connor McDavid. I got Connor Hellebuck. I know you're looking at me right now and thinking, just wait till July 1st.
Dude, you are so getting your ass kicked. I've been working my boys through their training camp here over the last 3 weeks or so, and we have one simple goal. It's not to win the league championship. I mean, if that happens, that's great, but that is to literally kick the ass at the Duff Brewmasters every chance we get. There are added incentives for these guys to beat your team every opportunity we get. I mean, you know, guys like Nate McKinnon and Cale Makar, they're already making a pretty hefty dough. Alex Pietrangelo in there as well too, but you know, they don't mind a few extra dollars here and there for incentive, shall we say, if and when every time that we defeat your club. And ironically, July 1st, day one of the league,
Canada Day.
Guess who goes head to head? St. Rose Royals and the Duff Brewmasters, right on opening day.
Will this be the most heated rivalry in fantasy hockey? The St. Rose Royals, the Duff Brewmasters.
I think it'll be the most heated among the GMs. I don't know about the players on the ice, but it's going to be heated among you and me. You've been chirping, I've been chirping, and we're just it's time to get down to playing action here and see who we're going to have. I got a bone I got to pick with you here, Mr. Cheapo over here. We're having our free agency for coaches right now, and poor Mr. Chris Knobloch, you've offered him $20 a year to be your head coach as a contract offer, whereas, you know, I've made more of a realistic offer, shall we say, trying to sign Paul Maurice as our head coach, and offering him $3.5 million a year. But poor Knobber, he's going to have McDavid and Draisaitl and Hellebuck pay for his meals pretty much on a nightly basis because he's making next to nothing as the coach.
You know what? His contract is extremely incentive based, and also being in Duff, Saskatchewan, I had to build a new arena. It's expensive. It is expensive bringing a team to a small community, and I'm building a palace. Like, I got to try and save money wherever I can.
I think you're breaking some labor laws, though, somewhere by only offering $20 a year. I mean, there's minimum wage, and then there's what you're offering to Knobloch. Let's put it that way. Wow.
Credit where credit is due. I think you've assembled a pretty good team. Looking forward to season number 1. Also, a big shout out to the Jade City Greenstones, a big follower of our podcast, Aaron Young, general manager, also trying to assemble a pretty good roster. So I like the camaraderie. We got players from all over the globe in this. And Jeff, I must say, as a friend, I think you've done a great job. I want to beat you to a pulp. But overall, as commissioner this league, kudos to you. You've done awesome.
Thanks a lot. Younger's got some work to do to get himself under the salary cap, but he's developing a pretty good team so far. And also got to give kudos to a friend and former coworker of you and I, James Blake, the newest GM in our league, as he takes over the Newfoundland Growl.
DJ Tiger Pants.
Yeah, that's
his name on Discord. Welcome to the league, DJ Tiger Pants. You know who else is doing pretty good? Connor McDavid. 8 points in his last 2 games. The Florida Panthers, 3-0. Sergei Bobrovsky was a brick wall. It looked like it was going to be tough to win a series in 4. The 4th game is always the toughest. But you thought even after they lost game 4 and were humiliated 8-1, maybe game 5 they would get the job done. They made it really tight, but the Edmonton Oilers have now dragged the Florida Panthers back to Edmonton for game number 6.
Thanks for that comment, Connor. That's exactly what he said after game 4. Is that
literal quote?
We have to go down to Florida and drag them back to Edmonton for game 6, and that's what they've done.
And now you would have to think you're still down in the series, Jeff. But you're getting scoring from the top line. Connor Brown, what an unbelievable game number 5. Opened up the scoring shorthanded on a beautiful breakaway that beat Sergei Bobrovsky. He does so many things, extremely strong on the stick. But it all comes down to Connor McDavid. Jeff, 42 points. The all-time record is 47. Now, McDavid has to get 6 more in the final 2 games of this series to pass Wayne Gretzky. Regardless of if he does or not, Connor McDavid, this is just unbelievable to watch.
No, it's been amazing. I mean, he has been this series for the last 2 games, 8 points in total. And as you mentioned, now the other big guns are starting to contribute. Draisaitl getting a couple points in game 4. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins getting off the schneid and getting a goal. Darnell Nurse. I mean, you go down the list. Zach Hyman with a goal last night on the power play in game 5 of this series. So the Oiler big guns, who were pretty quiet in games 1 and 2 and for most of game 3, have finally found some life in this series. And I mean, yes, Florida is still up in the series, 3-2. They only need 1 more win to clinch their first ever Stanley Cup. But how do you bet against the Oilers right now? At least sending this back to Florida for game number 7. I think the odds of it have got to be pretty astronomical that Edmonton will get it back to a game 7, and then once you hit game 7, I mean, anything goes. You throw
anything can happen.
You throw all the numbers out the door for a game 7.
I mean, the struggle in the start of the series was Edmonton was not getting anything done offensively, and Sergei Bobrovsky was outstanding. I mean, you look at Bobrovsky, 26 for 26, 17 for 18, 25 for 28. He was 68 for 72, a .944 save percentage in the first 3 games of this series. Then Edmonton woke up. 11 for 16 in game number 4 and 19 for 23 last night. He has given up 9 goals on the last 39 shots he has seen, which is a .769 save percentage. He had a firm grip on the Conn Smythe. That firm grip is no longer. He is not providing Florida. Granted, you're going up against one of the greatest offensive teams in league history, if I could say that. But Bobrovsky is not the Bobrovsky of the first 3 games.
Well, he has given up 12 goals in the last 7 periods. And you can even say 6 periods because he got pulled partway through the second period of game number 4 of that series. So after being so outstanding in the first 3 games of the series and for the playoffs, so for that fact, overall, the Oilers have seemed to have found a way to beat him now in the last, definitely in the last 2 games. And then again, going back at least to the third period of game number 3 as well, too. So whether it's going to be him refinding his game or the Panthers tightening up defensively now, they are going to have to make some pretty significant adjustments here going into Game 6 Friday night in Edmonton.
I tell you, Jeff, and it's crazy that I'm even saying this, but I have been extremely critical of Stuart Skinner. Extremely critical. That's
an understatement.
I have said countless times, and I'll own up to that. I've even gotten arguments with friends that are big Oilers fans that's how poorly I think of Stuart Skinner. First 3 games, .867 save percentage. Come Game 4 in the Stanley Cup playoffs, though, ahead before Game 5 even took place, Stuart Skinner was 8-0 in Games 4, 5, 6, and 7. In the last 2 games, he is 61 for 65, a 32 save performance, a 29 save percentage, and a .938 goals against average, and he's now 9-0 in Games 4, 5, 6, and 7. I have been super critical on this guy, but it just appears that, I don't know if I'm wrong 100%, but he is raising his play, Jeff, when he needs to. And even if he doesn't play outstanding, which he has, I don't think Edmonton needs an incredible goalie to win the Stanley Cup. They just need a goaltender that can make saves, and I remember Skinner made an outstanding save sliding from right post to left post in game number 5 to rob a Panther in tight. That should have been a goal. That allowed Edmonton to get themselves going offensively. I had zero faith in Stuart Skinner. Now I believe he might be a goaltender that is enough to lift a team to a cup if Edmonton continues with their offensive play.
Yeah, that's the big key, is the offense has to continue rolling. And what I wouldn't pay right now to be at Rogers Place on Friday night for
you could pay a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that is going to be some amazing sight on Friday night. Even just to be out in the moss pit on Friday night would be something to behold for that game number 6.
It's going back to Game 7, in my opinion. I mean, right now, Edmonton is playing with all of the mojo, all of the momentum. If you are Florida, Jeff, though, led by Paul Maurice, who, ironically enough, you bid, I think, $3.2 million to get him in the Canadian Fantasy Hockey League, he's still confident in his group. And maybe he should be. But something has to change for Florida to win this series, because Edmonton appears just to be getting their stuff and finding their stride. I mean, you go back to Edmonton, it's going to be a hostile environment in game number 6. I wish I could be in Rogers to watch that game in number 6. But if you're Florida, something has to change, and I think it has to change between the pipes to start with.
Well, I don't see Bobrovsky getting pulled for Anthony Stolarz for game 6. Bobrovsky will be in net, and once again, as I mentioned earlier, he's got to refine his game here in game 6. He's got to become the Sergei Bobrovsky from games 1 and 3 of this final series once again for the Panthers to have any chance of lifting the Stanley Cup Friday night in game number 6. But, back to the atmosphere at Rogers Place for Friday night for game 6. I remember living up in Fort McMurray the last time the Oilers were in the Stanley Cup final in 2006. And when they played the Carolina Hurricanes, I remember Fernando Pisani scoring in Game 5 to keep the series alive, sending it back to Edmonton for Game 6. And, I mean, this was in Fort McMurray alone. I can't speak for what it was like in Edmonton, but in Fort McMurray alone, after they won that Game 6 so convincingly, You had people driving up and down the street in Fort McMurray with Oiler flags, honking their horns and such like that. Imagine what it was like in Edmonton that evening. I know Skyreach or Rexall Place, whatever it would have been called at that time, the atmosphere inside that building, from when talking to a few people, was just unlike anything anybody had ever seen before. And very similar situation outside of Rexall Place and throughout Edmonton that evening. And it's going to be very similar, if not even bigger, come this Friday night for Game 6, the Oilers and the Panthers.
You know, Jeff, I do want to say thank you because I opened up the door for you to thrash me after how critical I've been of Stuart Skinner. Now, I don't know if it's because you feel bad for how bad you fleeced me in the first week of the CFHL that made a trade that saw you got the 8th overall legend pick, but I can appreciate you not being so critical on me for my comments on Stuart Skinner. But
you can't beat a man when he's down. You came up here and you admitted to your fault. How critical you were with Stuart Skinner. I'm not going to lay there and beat you with a club after you already came out and admitted that you were wrong in your opinion of Mr. Skinner.
Someone who probably wants to beat himself with a club perhaps is Rory McIlroy. What a disaster at the U.S. Open. That thing should have been locked. It should have been claimed. It should have been won by Rory McIlroy. But it wasn't. We're chatting U.S. Open in a moment. Tiger Woods, a special exemption. Pretty cool as well. Welcome back, folks. It's glad to be back here on the Heavy Hitter Podcast.
Duffy and Henny are coming back with a bang any moment now. Get ready for another round of intense action. Don't miss a beat. Head over to the Heavy Hitters Podcast on Facebook and hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop 24/7.
Welcome back. Once again, this is the Heavy Hitter Podcast. Big shout out to all our listeners from not only coast to coast in Canada, the United States, but across the globe as well. It is a thrill to be back. We just chatted about the National Hockey League, and now we're talking about the heartbreak at Pinehurst #2 involving Rory McIlroy. Hasn't won a major for a decade, but Jeff, I tell you, he should have won the U.S. Open. All kudos to Bryson DeChambeau for sticking with it, and that shot on 18 is one of the best clutch shots of all time. 55 yards out from in the bunker into a pin position, which was probably pretty favorable for him. But nonetheless, Rory McIlroy missed 2 putts under 4 feet on 16 and 18, 3 bogeys in his final 4 holes. Just not good enough, and really a shock for such a world-class player who heading into the week said, I'm closer than I have been for a very long time to winning a major championship. Just a shock that he was not able to seal the deal.
And I hate to say this, but where have we seen this before? McIlroy has had this happen to him on a number of occasions in past, not just majors, but past tournaments where he was in position to win the event come Sunday, and then he had some type of a Sunday collapse that takes him out of winning a championship. And that's where you and I know in the past have questioned his mental game and where it's at right now. And, you know, those questions are going to continue to come out now to McIlroy after this performance at the U.S. Open this past weekend at Pinehurst.
Jeff, where do you go from here? Because you mentioned mental, and it has to be mental because it's not physically. Outstanding shape. He mashes the ball almost as far as everyone, probably not as far as Bryson DeChambeau, but his iron play struggles heavily on Sunday. But again, why does it struggle so much? Where does he go from here? Because this is just as close of a disastrous loss as it gets for him.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think, if I'm McIlroy, I'm taking some time to look inward at my game and whatever mentally that means before the British Open, because the pressure for him now to win the British Open once again and to not have something like that is going to be immense. If he's in a similar position come the final round of the British Open, imagine what's going to be going through his head with a chance to win a major championship so close to home, and knowing in the back of his mind he has this history now of not coming into play fully, or at least not getting things done on a Sunday. So I think he needs to take some time and kind of sit back, reflect on his game, reflect on his mental part of his game more than anything, and try to get that back to where it needs to be before taking part in the Open Championship next month.
Now, he has said he's going to take a break. He'll be back at the Scottish Open next month, which is the week before the British Open. And last year he did win the Scottish Open, but not the British Open. Now, people were being super critical of Rory McIlroy after the round, not only for the fact that he lost, and I can understand why people would be critical after that, but just the fact that he left the premises extremely quickly. He did not talk to the media after the round, and I understand you have
blame him?
Yeah, you have your media obligations, but at that point, I understand why Rory would just want to get out of Dodge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know you got to have your media obligations, but as someone coming from the media himself saying this, I don't blame him at all. I mean, we've already talked about how devastating that loss would be, considering he was in such a good position early on in that round and then collapsed literally coming down the stretch. I know as someone, I would be having very tough times trying to collect myself to talk to reporters and try to explain what happened in that. So I completely get where Rory was wanting to walk away and not speak to anybody following that round on Sunday. Some other guys really surprising me with regards to their play. How about Scottie Scheffler not even making the cut at the U.S. Open?
Well, he made the cut. He made the cut.
Okay.
He was on the number. He was on the number 5 over after 2 rounds. But subpar golf, 71, 74, 71, 72. It wasn't the Scottie Scheffler that we have come accustomed to. Now, I guess that does beg the question, does this mean anything, Jeff, that Scottie Scheffler made the cut on the number and did not play good on the weekend when he was tasked with going up against golf's greatest test? Because year by year, the U.S. Open is seen as golf's greatest test. And when he was put up against that test, he did not play good, did not get on any birdie streaks. You saw him make some errors that Scottie Scheffler does not often make. Does this mean anything, or was it just as simple as a week off?
Well, let's go back to discussions we had around the PGA Championship following when he was arrested during that event and charged with a couple of offenses for that Friday morning incident trying to get into the PGA Championship in the midst of that investigation into a death of one of the workers there. I know I posed the question, what would this do mentally to Scottie Scheffler? And, how would he be able to recover from that and be able to still play golf with that? Now, this is where I think those questions start to come into mind here as far as, where is his game sitting at following all that happened at the PGA Championship earlier on this year. And I think that's the biggest question that a lot of people are going to be asking with regards to Scottie Scheffler, especially now leading up to the final major of the year, the British Open coming up next month.
Now, I don't think people have to overly worry yet about Scottie Scheffler, but if he continues to struggle in majors and going up against great tests, who knows? Maybe there are question marks around Scottie Scheffler. One question mark certainly is Tiger Woods. Will he ever win another major? Will he ever contend in another major? And last Thursday, I saw some early signs of brilliance from Tiger. Wasn't striking the ball outstanding off the tee. He was actually out driving his competitors in Will Zalatoris and Matthew Fitzpatrick, but his iron play wasn't sharp, but his short game was Tiger-esque, where you get it up and down from a tough spot and you make that 8-foot slider. Tiger was there, but ultimately did not make the cut. Finished at 7 over. The cut line was 5 over. This continues to beg the question, and I think we're getting closer to maybe getting the answer. Tiger still believes he can win a major championship. He has said that. He's going to try to do it at the British Open. I'm just not sure if Tiger can, with all that comes with, all the walking, the preparation that is needed. I don't know if Tiger's mind can still do it. Not sure Tiger's body can.
Well, and Tiger is maybe the only one, maybe people in his camp as well, the only ones that can think that Tiger Woods might still win a major championship at some point in his career. I think outside of that, the number of people that believe Tiger Woods could still win a major is rapidly decreasing. I know you're a big Tiger Woods fan, and I'll throw the question at you. Do you still think he can win a major championship the way his game is going right now?
I don't want to count Tiger Woods out, because I think on any given week, if he's feeling great preparation leading in, and I've seen what he can still do, the shots that he can still make, he can still bomb the ball. He can still get up and down from tight lies. It just, I don't think Tiger can string together the birdies that are needed to win most championships. Now, at the U.S. Open, it wasn't about birdie strings, because birdies were pretty few and far in between. But when you get to a PGA Championship, when you get to the Masters at Augusta, when you get to the British Open, it is all about getting those timely birdies and getting onto stretches where you go 4 under in a 6-hole stretch. I'm not sure if Tiger Woods can still do that. So I'm holding a small hope that Tiger Woods can still win a major championship.
But it's going down, isn't it?
It is. It is decreasing. But the buzz around Tiger, I think, Jeff, is still at an all-time high, because he now has the Tiger exemption, which will include him in 2025. Next season, he will have the ability to play in all of the signature events. The signature events in the PGA have purses of $20 million, with the winner getting $4 million. It was brought forward because of Live Golf. PGA tried to match Live. So I think that's cool. I think signature events, you need your biggest game ambassadors. You need the biggest in the sport to be front and center playing golf. I love what the PGA Tour has done, and I think we're going to get the chance to perhaps see Tiger 8 more times in those signature events, which, as a fan of golf and a fan of Tiger, that does excite me.
And I mean, it makes sense that they would do that for Tiger Woods, considering they are also opening the door for live golfers to compete in some of these signature events. I mean, definitely the 4 majors and some of the other bigger events, you are seeing guys from live golf still taking part in those events. And it makes perfect sense that why the PGA, and who Tiger Woods has been a massive supporter of, there's at no point ever been any discussion by Tiger of him going over to live golf. He's been actually very critical of live golf and is definitely a pro PGA guy. So it certainly makes sense why the PGA would make that special type of exemption for him.
So we talked about Rory McIlroy and the disaster for him, but we didn't talk about Bryson DeChambeau, who made that huge par putt and that huge par chip from the bunker on the 18th hole, and then a big par putt. Played steady golf all week long, and he won his second U.S. Open title, and I think he is exactly what golf needs right now. Mm-hmm. He calls himself an entertainer. On Sunday, he was at the golf course till like 10 o'clock taking pictures. You saw what he did with Johnson Wagner, trying to recreate that shot after as well. He is becoming one of the hottest commodities in golf, but it's a shame, Jeff. We're only going to see him, as of right now, very minimally, because he's on live.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It is, I think, disappointing for golf fans in North America that we're not going to see more of Bryson DeChambeau. He is a big hitter off the tee, and as you mentioned, definitely an entertaining guy to follow when he's playing his rounds. But unfortunately, that's the decision he made when he decided to go to live golf and follow the big money. And obviously has shown he's still been able to keep up his game being on the live golf tour, maybe not golfing as much as he would have as on being on the PGA tour full time, but still obviously able to come up with some big events and some big time moments when he is playing in these PGA related events.
I mean, man, I feel like at the end of the day, I'm not Jay Monahan. I have no stake in it. But this agreement with PIF and the PGA and the Saudis, something has to be done, because the PGA Tour, in my opinion, is hurting.
Yep.
Some of the top golfers in the world are on live. You look at Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Sergio Garcia made the cut at the U.S. Open and played some really good golf.
John Rahm.
And Rahm has openly said that he wants to play PGA Tour events. And, he didn't play in the U.S. Open because of injury, and he struggled in the previous majors this year. But you need these top golfers on the PGA Tour circuit. So whatever it takes, someone has to suck up their pride. I know there's a lot of pride going into this, and you don't want to give in to the other party, but something has to be done because LIV is flourishing. And even Tommy Fleetwood has said these signature events don't feel very signature without the likes of Rahm, without the likes of Bryson, without the likes of Koepka. And I agree with Tommy Fleetwood. So something has to be done, and I think it has to be done sooner rather than later, because the biggest thing in golf right now is Bryson DeChambeau. And he's not playing every week. He's not playing at the Travelers this week, which is another signature event. And it just boggles my mind. So I truly do hope something is changed, and something is changed in a heck of a hurry.
Well, money talks, and big name guys bring in fans, which bring in money for these events. And I'm sure at some point the PGA has got to take realization of that and has got to come back to the table and try to work out something here with LIV Golf so that we can see some of these big names at more tournaments over the year here in North America.
And speaking of big players, Winnipeg Blue Bombers fans are wondering when their big players are going to step up, because the Saskatchewan Roughriders right now, don't panic, blue and gold, but the white and green are ahead of us. I don't like that situation. Let's chat Canadian Football League in a moment. This is the Heavy Hitter Podcast.
Get ready, folks. The Heavy Hitters Podcast is about to bring the heat as Duffy and Henny return in just a moment. But here's the kicker. You can be part of the action, too. Want your voice heard on the show? Shoot the boys a message on their Heavy Hitters Facebook page with your burning question, and they'll give you a big shout-out next week when they answer it. But for now, buckle up for more heavy-hitting action with Duffy and Henny.
Welcome back one final time. Again, a big shout out to all of our listeners. Don't forget, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio. This is the Heavy Hitter Podcast, rolling on after a 3-week break. And speaking of 3 weeks, we're heading into week 3 of the Canadian Football League season. And Jeff, one thing I did not think we would still be searching for is a Winnipeg Blue Bomber win. Just 31 points in their first 2 games. They lost to the Montreal Alouettes to start, and then they lost against an Ottawa Red Blacks team who they had to delay that game because of weather with 2 minutes and 9 seconds left in the fourth. That delay was around 50 minutes, but the Bombers still searching for a win. I am just shocked with their roster because it's still a pretty darn good roster.
It's a very good roster. Mind you, not having Brady Oliveira has hurt. I mean, he is the reigning top Canadian in the CFL. He's the reigning rushing champion in the league. And that not having him back there to carry the rock has certainly hurt. It's put more pressure on Zach Collaros to deliver. Losing Kenny Lawler due to injury in week 1 certainly hurt Zach Collaros and those efforts with regards to passing the ball. But there's still lots of talent on that team, like you mentioned. Still some good receivers, Dalton Schoen, Drew Wolodarski, just to name a few. Defense, they've still got Willie Jefferson. They've got Adam Bighill now back in the lineup after his injury. This is a team that, surprisingly, I think to a lot of people, is 0-2 so far. And they've got BC this week. That's not going to be an easy to turn around to take out the Lions as well, too. The Lions are a much better football club over the last couple of years as well, too. Beat the Bombers handily once in Winnipeg last year, early on in the season. And Winnipeg's got to find some way to turn their season around here and turn it around in a hurry. I think last time they went 0-2 was 2016, I believe. So it's been a while since they've struggled this much to start a season.
And I even go back to the preseason, Jeff, and preseason is preseason. Take it for what it's worth. But the Bombers scored 22 points in 2 preseason games. And now you look at the first 2 games of the regular season, they've scored 31 points. Defensively, the Bombers have only allowed 50 points in 2 games, which is not that poor. Offensively, this is just a team that looks super underwhelming. And you talk about Oliveira, but Zach Collaros to me is looking extremely underwhelming. He only has 494 yards passing. He's only completing 54% of his passes. It just doesn't appear that this Winnipeg team has their mojo. They don't look good offensively. They're throwing a ton of short passes, not really going down the field. And in a league that is a passing league, you expect some spark. Winnipeg just doesn't seem to have that spark offensively whatsoever right now. So no matter how good their defense plays, the offense is just not living up to the billing. And I expect a lot more from a veteran and a Grey Cup champion in Zach Collaros.
I agree. I expect a lot more from him as well, too. But again, I think this shows just how much the importance of Brady Oliveira and the running game has been to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers over the last couple of years. You had Andrew Harris prior to that, and now Oliveira. When they're able to eat up significant yards from the line of scrimmage on the run, teams can't necessarily commit to just covering the passing game. They've got to be wary of that run, and that opens the field up for Zach Collaros to be able to hit some of those longer passes. Now, teams know that the Bombers are struggling on the running game. They're basically giving the Bombers, I think, the running game to try and develop something, and are taking their chances on trying to make sure that Zach Collaros can't beat him with his arm. And right now, it's worked for both the Montreal Alouettes and the Ottawa Redblacks so far in this season. And Collaros, I'm sure, is one guy in particular who is eagerly waiting for Brady Oliveira to get back into the lineup, or for someone like a Johnny Augustine or somebody else on that club to literally pick up the rock and run with it more for the Bombers here this season.
I mean, I tell you, two full games. Johnny Augustine leads the Bombers in rushing right now with 46 yards. That is pitiful. That is just not good enough. And when you talk about teams, rivals, you have to bring out the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who are on the other side of the coin. They're 2-0. They have 62 points, so they have doubled the amount of offensive production than Winnipeg over the first two games of the season. And Trevor Harris, 695 yards. That is 201 yards more than Zach Collaros. So that's averaging of 100.5 more yards passing per game. You look at their receivers. They have three guys over 100 yards, led by Jarvis Stearns and his 193 yards. I think it's always a tough realization for a blue and gold fan, a Winnipeg Blue Bomber fan, to realize that the Saskatchewan Roughriders are ahead of you in the standings. But at this point, Jeff, I don't even know if you can compare the two teams, because not only is Saskatchewan playing comparable defensively, they are just outclassing Winnipeg through the air and offensively. These are two different ball clubs right now, and that's tough, I would imagine, for you as a Bomber fan. I know for me as a Bomber fan, that's tough to accept.
It's very tough, especially when you've got a fiance and her family that are all Saskatchewan Roughrider fans, and you hear about it constantly. So it's definitely tough. With regards to the Roughriders, I mean, you also have to consider Harris missed a good part of last season due to injury. They had to run through quarterbacks for a good portion of that season last year, which would show as to why their offense maybe struggled at times. Trevor Harris is a good quarterback, and when you can keep him healthy, keep him upright, and able to throw the ball and make plays, Trevor Harris is going to do that for your hockey or for your football club. They've also strengthened that O-line by adding, of all people, Jamarcus Hardrick from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I think people are now realizing just how big of a role he played with the Bombers and helping that running game flourish the way it did, because he's gone in and hasn't missed a beat as of yet on the O-line for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So it is interesting to see the Riders get the Ticats at home, I believe, this weekend once again, a chance to go 3-0. They had a close victory over Hamilton this past weekend. Now they get them at Mosaic Stadium. And as mentioned, the Bombers with that tough matchup against BC this coming weekend as well, too. Boy, in what world would you ever believe there'd be a possibility where 3 weeks into the season, the Saskatchewan Roughriders could be 3-0 and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers could be 0-3? That's
a cruel world.
It's almost unimaginable for any Blue Bomber fan.
And BC's no slouch, especially offensively, because Vernon Adams Jr. is a beast. He's thrown for 640 yards this year. BC has 53 points. I hate to harp on the offensive inability so far as Winnipeg, but they have the lowest amount of points of any team with 2 games played. The Edmonton Elks, for God's sake, have 41 points and more than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So things have to get better offensively. I think Winnipeg will continue to keep their team in football games defensively, which I will say, though, Jeff, is a nice caveat, because at least they're getting good play on the defensive side of the ball, and you would think eventually this star-studded roster will figure things out offensively. Dalton Schoen was back in practice, which is good to see. So once Winnipeg gets going offensively, I think this is still a pretty good football club. I don't know if they're Grey Cup favorites, but this is still a team that will be a contender.
It's a team that's been to 4 straight Grey Cup games, has lost the last 2, but again, they're 2-2 in the last 4 Grey Cup championships, and they've got to find a way to turn it around because this is an old roster. I hate to say that, but there are a lot of veterans that are on the downside of their career, shall we say, right now. Maybe only have a couple of years left. Zach Collaros being one of those guys, Willie Jefferson another one. So they've got to find a way to turn this around this year and make some hay because, the next couple of years, once these guys eventually
hosting the Grey Cup next year,
it's going to be some tough years coming up here for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers unless they can find some very talented individuals to replace these guys over the next couple of years because right now they've got all of their eggs into the basket with guys like Collaros and Willie Jefferson and Adam Bighill, and they're not going to be around forever. When those guys are done, it's going to be a pretty massive rebuild for this Bomber franchise.
So we're 2 weeks into the season. Things have been tough. Let's predict. Let's start with this week's game against BC, and then let's give an overall prediction of what the Bombers' record will become. And this is just another chance for me and you to go head-to-head.
Well, first off, offhand, when is Brady Oliveira scheduled to come back for the Bombers?
He's been practicing. He's been on the turf. He feels confident. From what I've heard, and one of my friends is a beat reporter for the Blue Bombers, Oliveira's he's confident. He's ready, and his body is feeling better.
Will he play this weekend, though?
Tossed.
If he doesn't play this weekend, Bombers go to 0-3. If he plays, I give them a chance of winning this game against BC on the weekend. But I think for the Bombers to turn the season around, they have to get Brady Oliveira back in the lineup and get that running game going. Otherwise, it's going to be a long season for the Bombers.
What's their record? 18 games.
18 games. If Oliveira gets back into the lineup soon, which it sounds like will be the case, I'll say they'll be an over 500 team. I'll give them 11-7, 10-8. But the longer he stays out of the lineup, the better the chance the Bombers are a sub 500 team and don't even make the playoffs.
I love the experience on this roster, but you hit the nail on the head there. They're old. Other teams in the league are not as old as this Winnipeg roster is. I think, of course, it matters on Oliveira, but I don't think it's going to matter this week, regardless of if he plays or if he doesn't. I think BC takes this game. I think they're just going to overpower Winnipeg with their offensive prowess. And that, I also mentioned Winnipeg's doing a pretty good job defensively, but I think BC wins this game. And Winnipeg, they're on a pretty slippery slope. You have to, I think, prove something within the next 2 to 3 weeks. If you go into week 7 with a record of 1-5, this could be a Bombers season that you're looking at maybe 5-6 wins. Mm-hmm. With that being said, if you do turn things around and you win 3 of your next 4 games or 3 of your next 5 games, I think this is still a Winnipeg team that could get to 11 wins. I'm going to go right in the middle of that 10-8 or 10-9, I should say, or 11-9, I should say. I'm going to give them 10 wins on the season. I'm not counting them out of winning the Grey Cup. I'm not counting them out of making their 5th straight appearance there because experience does matter at the end of the day. But I think Mike O'Shea has to get something else out of this group, and they have to do it in a hurry.
10 wins might not be enough to get him into a playoff spot in the West, but I think 10 wins gets him at least a crossover to the East playoffs.
The East. What a dismal division. Things aren't going well for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Hopefully this week they turn things around against the BC Lions. Nonetheless, Jeff, I think it's time for us to take a little bit of a break, although we could chat for days on end. But this has been fun. And why don't we come back next week to do more?
We'll see you folks in 7.
This is the Heavy Hitter Podcast. We'll chat with you around the clock.
That's a wrap for this week on the Heavy Hitters Podcast. Don't forget to give the guys a follow on Twitter at It's the Duffy One and Jay Henson 73. You can also keep up to date with the podcast by visiting the Heavy Hitter Podcast on Facebook. Duffy and Henny will return next week, but for now, keep it real and keep it heavy hitting.